Welcome to Vacation and the Disrupt Education podcast. Hey guys, it's me. I know you know me. It's Peter Hostrasser. I'm here with Ali Privet. This is our summertime shoot off, start off, whatever summertime episode. How do we kick it off, Ali? Where do you want to start? We're on a beach if you're watching. The same one, evidently.
Beach. We're just mixing it up. We got a little spice. It's the end of the school year. And that's where this episode is coming from, right? We're diving into the summer season, but many people who listen to this podcast and educators, see this time as a transition period, whether it's transitioning to a new job, leaving school, a new role within a school. It could just be changing grade levels, changing classrooms. Who knows, right? But it's also a time of reflection.
Mm-hmm.
We have found we like to do kind of an end of the school year recap. What did we notice? Looking back at our episodes, other conversations we've had on the podcast, off the podcast, etc., and just kind of bring it to everyone, as well as preview a little bit later where we're going this summer. And I don't know about your plans for the summer. I'm not planning on going to a beach. Other than local beaches around Minnesota and Wisconsin, nowhere tropical planned currently this summer. So it's kind of funny that this background, but a lot of people do go to the beach or the ocean and whatnot during the summer.
Yeah. I'm going to end up in Spain with my wife for our 25th anniversary. So there you go. So I will be on the beach, and it will be a place that I've never been before. So I'm excited about that.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I think, kind of going into 25 years of marriage, let's start with what's wrong. Well, let's like the struggles. I want to talk quickly about the struggles because I want to start with kind of the tough things that happened this year, but then end on, hey, these are some great things that we can do. So that's kind of, where I was going to go with this, and then stop me wherever. But I think and maybe you can, comment a little bit about, your experiences, being a professor and whatnot. Even a teacher teaching people to jump out of planes. I mean, you're educating people and you're actually a learner on that as well. So I think one of the biggest challenges that happened this year that I think we need to reflect on is this attendance issue, right? What's behind it? I mean, this is going to be a whole nother podcast, but I think it's something that we need to really reflect on is, how are we going to challenge it? I've seen things out there where schools are now charging the parents, but that can be inequitable. There are different, you miss so many classes it used to be where they drop you from a class, all these different things, and they're struggling to figure it out. It's not an easy problem, but I think that's the biggest challenge that we faced in the system. What are your thoughts on that? And maybe, I don't know if you saw that at the collegiate level or even people just not showing up for their times when they're supposed to be in an airplane with a parachute.
With skydiving, a lot of people in that realm will make an appointment and they won't show up. So it's pretty typical if, let's say a group of 4 make a reservation, to have 1 or 2, the numbers will be lower. There's a whole bunch of fear around that, or
Sure.
your friend is like, hey, let's go do this, and they sign a bunch of people up and then they don't.
Right.
And then even in the classes, talking to other skydiving instructors and whatnot at other drop zones, people who start the process for getting their license versus finished is maybe 10%.
Wow.
It's not a high percentage. It's a challenging sport, but I think it's more related to, it's expensive relatively for a sport. And there's also, it takes a lot more time than people think, the training. But in terms of education, I'm thinking, a lot of those things, maybe the numbers aren't the same, but similar things are occurring, right? So students, where they're at, right? Like the quote unquote ease of access to information, they
Mhm.
think that school maybe should be easier and less work than it actually is. And um because of the pandemic or potentially other contributing factors, there could be reasons why going to school physically is challenging
Mhm.
for whatever reason.
Yeah.
I will say that in the families and circles that I'm in, the biggest factor that I've seen that contributes to getting students to school is their family. All right.
Mhm.
Like, what are the conversations that are being had around education and the expectations set from the home? It 100% is a contributing factor. It might not be the only one, like,
Right.
you've got student personalities, but from my perspective, it's like if school is just kind of like you're just going, checking the box, whatever, it's not of a high concern to the family, then that trickles down to the kid.
Right.
Um, but there's a lot of contributing factors, I'm sure, to attendance issues, but it is certainly one that school leaders, right, like have to consider from their perspective because they can't necessarily affect the home conversation. So then it's
Right.
like, well, it kind of goes back to like this idea of like, well, what are you selling? In some
Right.
what experiences are the students having at school that makes it beneficial for them to physically be there versus can they do what they're doing at school in their pajamas on their bed or couch?
Mhm.
Is there a reason for them? I mean, sometimes it's just an efficiency thing, like, oh, well, it would take me 6 hours to do all of this work, but if I just watch these 3 15-minute videos and fill out these worksheets that I can like pick apart myself and I don't need to
Mhm.
sit in a 50-minute class period, I'm not really incentivized to go to school. I mean, so when we have all these conversations about all these cool, interesting things happening at different schools, my brain goes, "Oh, I would go to school if that was what the day was calling upon." And it it's a two-way street,
Right.
right?
I think, right away, because we're on a beach, that, my mind goes to, a lot of people are trying to figure out, what's going through these students' minds and such. And I think there's a gap. There's an interesting gap here between like students who are a part of maybe the principal's council or the superintendent's council. And those students are typically good students. They're great at academics. They love being in school and or they've got a solid kind of push behind them with parents. I think it would be interesting really to really just find out, if you have a kid who's missed like 50, 60 days, which happens a lot more than you think it does now, Allie. You ask that student, you're like, no, give me the real, man. Like, why do you not come to school? And I think you're going to get probably some of the answers that you just said, maybe other ones that were, we don't know what we don't know. But I think that's a very interesting way to kind of challenge this crazy thing. And these are kind of things, again, that educators, people who are either teachers or administrators or whatever can create these things in a summertime. Now, I know there are not 24/7 schools, but there are year-round schools. But also you can still have in these downtimes and have these conversations when you are on breaks. Just try to think a little bit outside the box because you're so much checking the box while you're in school, right? I mean, today I was like having a conversation with my insurance agent when we were talking about something with our cars. And that was a text while we were in a professional learning crew while I was getting ready for the seniors to leave. It was just like one of those things where it's just everything's go, go, go. And then you get on the quote unquote college schedule in summertime, or in any breaks. I shouldn't just, say just summertime, but in any breaks that you have. So then you have time Wouldn't it would be great to build that into a day, but I don't think, those problem solving solutions can always be done in a day, and I think that's the biggest challenge. The transition. Do you remember your transition from like the end of a school year in the summer? Do you remember that? It was a couple years
Like when I
ago.
was
Just
still
saying.
preparing, when I was still preparing to teach the following year.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, what are some
I
thoughts
mean,
on that?
so I would always I was not like a, oh, sit and simmer end of the year teacher. I would be already planning, making copies,
Hmm.
thinking through the fall so that because I was not planning on spending a ton of physical time in the school building over the summertime.
Hmm.
Inevitably, there'd be some days that I would be there for various reasons, but at the end of the school year for a high school teacher often has half days or the final schedules. You have longer plan periods, which you can just kick back and relax, finish your grading, clean your classroom and whatnot.
Hmm.
But I know for me, the transition up until the school year ended would involve like that would be heavy creative time because I'm still in go mode. I'm still ready. I'm thinking about my schedule for the fall and what can I change and make notes and things I want to like tinker with and adjust. I remember trying to do as much of that as possible. But I know for me, as soon as like the school year would end, the first week or two would be no plans,
Hmm.
lots of sunshine, being outside, like the transit, it was almost like night and day. And I know
Right.
I've said this, we had a whole episode, I think, on school alley versus summer alley. Like I would literally flip a switch and go into a whole other, it felt like a whole other person
Hmm.
where I was not in like go, go, go mode. And I would be like kind of like what you'd picture on a beach, just like poolside, relaxing, reading books, or literally just going for walks with nothing, just listening to the sights and sounds around me. And there wouldn't be a million things on my to-do list. In fact, the smaller the list, the better the list
Hmm.
in that transition period until I'd have to like kind of ramp it back up again. But that was probably because of how hard I went during the school year. Like I would definitely pack over a year's worth of work into those 9 to 10 months,
Hmm.
right? So the transition was it was good on the end of school year to summertime, but I know like the going back into school, that switch was much harder to turn back on.
Eloquently put, because that's exactly what I'm about to make happen. Like when that last day comes, and then all of a sudden there's just you're sitting around, your dogs are looking at you. They're like, "What are you doing home?" It's hard for me to like slow down, right? And I have to take a few days. And it's probably good because my wife and I finish at a different time. So if you have like a spouse or somebody's with you, your family, she's a week later than I am. So I can kind of like, calm down at home first, like, or one of us can, because it's a switch. It's really weird. I can't think, maybe like being a professional athlete, but is there
Mm,
anything else that is really like this? Like, I guess, like after a season, let's just say you're in the NBA and you just shut it off, like after you lose your last game or whatever, or win the whole thing or whatever it is, like it's like that. You just shut it down and it's over. And then you start looking at the next year. It's weird. It's really weird when you think about it. I don't know.
it is. I think the only other type I'm thinking of work that's coming top of mind would be, people who work the fair industry in the summertime. And then the
Yeah.
one fair, like seasonal work, I'm thinking, oh, if you do lawn care, but you don't do like, at least
Snow
in the
removal.
upper Midwest, you don't do snow
Right.
removal, or construction is really heavy in the spring, summer,
Hmm.
uh, fall, but not in the wintertime. So there probably are there are other professions that have this.
Right.
However, the start and stop period is probably not as defined as
Yeah.
it is for educators. And it is a reason why a lot of educators stay in the profession I mean, I know my mom growing up, she was like, she at one point wanted to be a veterinarian. She loves animals,
Hmm.
but she chose being a special educator, special ed education educator because of the summer. She wanted the summers with her kids and with the family to go and do all of the mom stuff.
Hmm.
And I know plenty of moms my age who that's the exact reason. Like they're like, oh, I could go get another job. I can make more money, quote unquote, but I wouldn't trade the time that I get in the summers with my children. And
Hmm.
so when I think about, oh, people thinking about going into the profession and what is one of the biggest reasons I would selling points for why people go into education, it is for that 10-ish week break
Hmm.
that is set. And even like the week and a half around Christmas, you get a week off for spring break. There's now typically a fall break that's
Right.
5 days, a long weekend, or sometimes it's even a week now.
Right.
Those, if you can match your children's schedules, is a huge selling point
Hmm.
that I think will keep some people in education when they're having kids and they want that time with their kids.
Right. The competition is out there as well now with like remote and hybrid learning, or hybrid jobs, that are happening, right? Like 4-day weeks. Some schools are like going to that, and those types of things are interesting. So maybe it's not quite shut down. It's, just a good flow where you have a little bit more balance, or what have you around that. The end of the year is really, really, it's very interesting. It's a very telltale part of being in a school community. Um, Obviously, you can see a lot of the educators are, I mean, it's an exhausting time. It's a tense time. There's a lot, especially in the secondary. There's a lot of procrastination that you have to deal with because it's just part of maturity with a lot of the students. But you can really see like students will, they'll go through every emotion, and it's kind of an honor to be there with them while they go through that. I think because you get to see, who they really are, because they've hidden it. Students are the best. And we talked about this before, the best poker players in the world, right? They're going to tell you what you want to hear. They're going to look you straight in the face and just say, I did my homework when they didn't. They're the greatest when it comes to that. But when it comes to an end of a year, especially for seniors, you can kind of see the anxiety of people like raise. Not that that's a good thing. It's just like you can be there for them and let them know, what it's like, in the next level. Um, it's funny because like a lot of kids, like you will see them go through the hall, and some kids are just like, hey man, I did it. I got my stuff. I'm ready to go. And most of those kids have matured a little bit earlier because they understand time management. And then you have the kids who are scrambling, like, what can I do to get my grade up? Can I still do that assignment from 3 months ago? Like things like that. And you're still teaching them lessons, but you have to be very empathetic. You have to be like understanding, like, look, the answer is no, but here's what's going to happen in like 2 weeks when you walk across that stage. After you get that diploma, no one's going to be there for you. So what I want you to do is just to learn the lesson. Yeah, sure. Sorry, you're going to get a B minus, but you're going to be okay. And that's part of being an educator. That's like a lot of people know, like you've done that teaching science. I do that teaching business. A math teacher will do that teaching math. Like that's part of our jobs that a lot of people don't really see at the end of a school year. And it is an honor to be able to do that. And it's a very, very, I guess it's an art to do that. I mean, do you remember doing that with the students? Like, oh my gosh, Ms. Privet, help me.
Absolutely. I mean, that it is a chaotic um season of the school year. I mean, because grades are, real, the transcript, it maybe shouldn't be so chaotic, right? It's
Mhm.
like you've shown me what you learned. I remember having this conversation all the time with students. It's like you have been showing me what you have learned for the last 180 days or 90 days if it's just
Yeah,
a
that's
semester
crazy,
long
isn't it?
course.
Yeah.
And for me, the end of the year was like, I would try and have the conversations like, this should be a celebration of your learning.
Mm-hmm.
That's not necessarily the messaging that comes with doom and gloom finals. Like, it will be this percentage of your grade, but I would really try to be like, okay, numbers aside,
Mm-hmm.
have you learned anything this year?
Yeah.
Numbers aside, like, can you show me that you've learned some things this year? Great. That's what this test, this final, this experience is for you to showcase. Try and do that with your other classes. Let the cards fall where they fall. Not everyone, would be like open to receiving that message because they'd be so stressed out of their minds. You don't
Right.
have those students, but eventually, like, the message would get through to them. I can distinctly remember a student writing me an email years later and saying something to the extent of like, that conversation of you emphasizing that the grade at the end is going to fall where it's going to fall, and you just show what you've learned,
Mm-hmm.
really help them in college not stress out with their peers when their peers were going a mile a minute and quote unquote the stakes were higher, because if you didn't get a certain grade, you couldn't maybe continue in the nursing program or the engineering program or whatever program they were in, because there are weed out classes.
Right.
The other thing that I would say about being an educator, and maybe, I don't know, we've talked about extensively on the podcast, that it's just a nice kind of thing to consider, is that you are spending this year in relationship and having conversations with students, and it's really preparing them for like the next step,
Mm-hmm.
which, as you're saying, is, oh, it's an honor to be a part of it. And if you're in education, I think it's worth remembering how influential at any level you can be to a young person. And no matter like the level of stress you're in, and in this end of the year season, is that the power of those conversations can be super impactful. And I don't know, I would always try and be my least stressed self around students. I mean,
Yeah.
right? So that I could better receive their anxieties, but not like respond in it.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe that's helpful to someone out there, listening to the podcast. And, if your job, maybe it's not, doesn't have that kind of seasonality, but if you just kind of step back and think, oh, how am I going to respond to this person? And am I responding in a stressed manner? Whenever you're in a transition period, it can be easy to maybe forget that. And this would be the time of year to kind of think through, where are you at? Do a check-in.
I am guilty.
I've been
Yeah,
too.
I've and I even had those open conversations with my students. Especially at this time of year when they're about ready to make that big transition. It's just like, I'm not without days, and they all like, they start laughing because they know some days I'm stressed and some days I'm not. And I think that's being open, but I like that kind of mindfulness, finding some mindfulness in the summertime, in the downtime. Not only just regenerate yourself, but then get you, maybe it's a great time to really start a habit that you can take right into the fall, like a good habit of possibly, maybe doing some sort of physical exercise, or, a lot of, mental breaks, anything and everything around that. I think that's summertime is a great time to really try some things. But being consistent with it is very, very important. It's funny because there's a lot of words of wisdom that is kind of like brought back up, even like what you said, where a student will like get back to you, a couple years down the road and say, thank you for that conversation. I mean, as an educator, I get a lot of those now. Like, I ask students, what was the main thing that you've learned in this class? What is something that you'll remember this by? What is something I can improve upon? And we have those conversations. And especially for seniors, but in general, students really start to understand like, oh, wait, this person is a lifelong learner and they're trying to make it better. And that's actually how they've made me become a better teacher, because I'm asking these questions. And usually at the end of the year, if you're an educator, or what can we do better, right? And because there's like, you're at the end, for some reason students usually open up, especially like teens. They like, they're really going to tell you for
Mhm.
some reason. And that's why I think it's very important at the end of a school year like this that you have some sort of self-evaluation that you give to students, whether it's an open conversation or maybe even a Google form or something like that. But they like that for some reason, like, this is the best time that I found. I've done it before, at the beginning of a semester, middle of the semester, but at the end of the semester is a great time to collect some information for the next time that you step into a classroom.
I agree. I would definitely do those surveys. They can be brutally honest. And you're
Hmm.
like, I mean, some of the things would be like, oh, you gave too much homework, or your tests were too hard, or you graded, down. And I'm like, all right. But I would always try and be like, what did you learn? Like what
Right.
were your takeaways? And just to see, what did stand out and what can be improved from your perspective. But yeah, no, kids would definitely speak their mind. Even college students, from the
Hmm.
college perspective, we had we've had to give uh forgetting what they're called, but they have like, it's end of course type
Like
assessments that
evaluations and whatnot.
colleges, yeah,
Yeah.
evaluations that are like standardized,
Hmm.
and at least at the high school level, I didn't have any standardized ones, but
Yeah.
the college level I did. And it'd be so interesting to be like, some of the things the students would say, like, I know this isn't your fault, but
Yes.
right, I want to tell you, it's like bigger than you. And they're
Hmm.
like, they'd always, if you built a strong relationship with students, they tend not to like grill you all, they're like, they can recognize. I think that's probably one of the biggest differences from college to high school is that the college kids can recognize like, what you contributed as a professor
Hmm. Hmm.
versus like what you did not. And they can but in high school, sometimes there'd be things that would be way outside of my control,
Yep.
like the length of the class period or
Right.
something. I have no control over that, but it would be interesting to kind of reflect upon. Is there
It's a maturity thing. It definitely is a maturity thing with high school kids versus older learners, because yeah, their worldview changes a little bit. They have a little bit more freedom. They can kind of see some different things. I mean, I get it all the time. I'm like, especially with senior checkout, why is the school doing this? I'm like, I don't know. Like, I am here teaching you entrepreneurship, but I don't know why they're doing that around your, checkout list or whatever. I can speculate, but how about this? Why don't we think like an entrepreneur? What would make it better, right? What are those things? So there are these funny little learning moments that are quick, and I don't know. I call them like quick and dirty at the end of the year, but I take notes on it. I always take notes on my phone. I have like 3 different pages on my phone of notes, because when I hear something, I'm like, okay, I gotta drop that in there. A kid said that. Um, I think one of the other things that's really cool about um, especially being in high school, but in any grade level, is when you do come back, right? The growth of some kids, like not only physically but mentally. I mean, I'll have kids come up to me and they'll be like, "Hey, Mr. H." I'm like, "Who are you again?" Because I don't even recognize you,
Oh yeah.
especially from freshman to sophomore for boys. Like, that's a big thing. Girls are usually like 7th, 8th grade to, freshman year. Because y'all are smarter and mature faster than us, let's be honest. So, but yeah, I think that's something to keep in mind. You know, your kids, it's a time to like let go, right? It's a time to like let go of I think all the like the good, the bad, just kind of let it go. And like you said, like if somebody told you, oh, well, Miss Privet, your tests are too hard, you're going to take that with a grain of salt. But then guess what? You're going to get like about 10 weeks to chill out about it. So, but then you'll come around to it. So you'll have time to actually think about the things that you have been kind of evaluated on, which is so key, because if it's in the moment, and in school, you and I know, like, it's fast. Like, there is hardly any downtime. You shovel your lunch in for 10 minutes, which in the summertime is nice because you can take like an hour and a half lunch. You can go to the bathroom whenever you want. All these things, but like, then you have time to kind of to soak it in. So I think being intent in the end of the year about how are you going to improve. Now, this year, it's not quite out there. I'll just throw a hint. I am not going to be at the same school that I'm at, but we'll do that a little bit later. But still, like, I still kind of want to learn about what I didn't do, what maybe I did do great. And again, I keep going back to that because in summertime, yeah, you're just gonna let a lot of those things go. I tend not to hang out with a lot of teens though in summertime. I mean, I don't know why. Maybe it's because I'm working with them all year. So what about you?
Lovely. Oh, as we're thinking about, oh, okay, we're wrapping up the school year, we're going into summer. We have been thinking about here on the podcast is like, what do we want to bring our listeners
Yeah.
This summer? And before we kind of preview that, I want to kind of give anybody who is listening that, is in education at any level, whether you're a teacher, you're a student, you're an administrator, you're in higher education, you're working with a school district in some kind of consulting capacity, you're a parent, etc. And I think one of the best ways to kind of wrap up a school year is think about, how did I overcomplicate this year?
Mm-hmm.
How could I have made things simpler? How could I streamline? And that looks so different at every level, even if you're a student versus you're the superintendent. And, like, what are we overexerting on? Where is there too much red tape? Because honestly, I think, we've talked about like, oh, some things that keep people in the system and like good things that come at this end of the year, but there's room for improvement. And I don't think it's adding more things to the curriculum or to the school building or whatever. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it starts with like, what can we remove? And, starting there.
Yeah.
So that's kind of just my, end of the year thing that I would think about. Where could I simplify? What could I delete, remove? Because if your plate is full, educators' plates are full. I mean, I always felt like my plate was full.
Overflowing.
Overflowing, right? Like, what can I remove? What is overcomplicated, unnecessary, redundant, etc. So that's what I would kind of, before we full send this summer season that we're about to kick off, that's where I would kind of ask our listeners, to reflect and, taking all the notes that you've had and gathered and whatnot, is just like, where did I do too much? Or where did the school do too much? Where did the community do too much? Like, and thinking about that before we then go and add,
Right.
or change, even laterally.
That is a great point. Taking away things, what didn't matter, what didn't work, what doesn't work, what blocks things. That's a great way to start your summertime, and or just, if you're about ready to rebuild something, let's look at what doesn't work, what you don't need, and then take it away. That's wonderful, because guess where we're going in the summer? Well, we're going to go into, I'm just going to throw this out because it'll be a part of the title. The next one is Crushing It, right? So now, after you make that transition, We're bringing on guests that are just amazing people, not only educators, they're business people, they are speakers, um, just some great stuff to excite you about now you're in the sandbox. So, what are you going to make in the sand? What are you going to create? We've talked about it before, but there's a lot of pretty cool things out there. There's a lot of ways that you can connect with people. If you're watching us here on LinkedIn, or if you are listening to the podcast, um, there's a lot of connections that you can make. There's also a lot of really cool conferences out there that you can jump into. And I know like I've never been like a big, oh my gosh, it's a summer conference, but you can tie those into a little bit of a vacation because some of these are in really different places, obviously. And if your school pays for it, take a friend along, take your spouse along, take somebody. I mean, it is a getaway. You don't have to come back right in the school. So it does allow you to do that as well. But yeah, let's talk about what do we have coming up for the summer in your eyes, Allie?
So, we're sitting earlier this spring and we're having all these amazing conversations with different innovative. I feel like we really have been diving into like all these different ways that you can innovate and change and disrupt education.
Mm-hmm.
And we've had a summer series about like slowing down and resting and relaxing. And I remember talking to you and I was like, but what if instead of this R&R summer, we were like, no, we're going to be relentless and we're going to go hard in the summertime, which is quote unquote a downtime. And that's where we're headed. I mean, I'm not going to give away any guests or anything, but we're talking to people who are like A gaming it all the way around, which is not necessarily like a popular series that would maybe go for the summer, but we were like, no, because it's the quote unquote slow time where you can make the most gains. I remember a scene, it's very commonplace now, but people will say things like, oh, if you want to be strong for the summer, or, you have to start in the wintertime. It's not the 6 weeks before summer, get
Mm-hmm.
lean, get strong. Like it's a lot of preparation and planning. So we were like, okay, we've talked about how the summer is that planning and preparation time. So if you really want to make change and disrupt and do all this stuff, you're going to have to take the summer. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
you're on a beach for some of it, but then you are working for that next level. So it's like a short term, go all in, but for a long term, success or change or disruption. And that's what we wanted to bring to our listeners this summer. And we're very excited about where
Mm-hmm.
the series is developing.
You I know you always reap what you sow, and I think that it's great. It's a little against the grain, but guess what? When I found out there was a lot of educational podcasts out there and great ones that take the summer off, I'm like, why? That didn't like I just didn't, and that's cool. I mean, I don't want to like rip on any podcasters because good for them, but we don't. And we don't because I think it's a like you said, it's that time to like just churn and burn. Like let's make some things happen. And I'm just going to leave everybody with this and as you come into this series, look, I know we're tired. I know like, it's restless nights. It's just packing up your classroom if you need to move somewhere, or it's working with kids who are just like last minute Larrys, all these different things that are happening, right? I just made that up, last minute Larry. I don't know.
I like it.
But sorry to all the Larrys that aren't last minute, but like now's the time. If you want your next year in a school year to be great, just like Ali said, you've got to start working in the summer and you got to start building these things. And since I've been doing that, which I've been doing for a while, I can see my year gets less and less stressful. It's not quote unquote easier, but it's so more engaging. I mean, it's so much more fun. And I feel like, in 22 years of education, the summers that I have dug in and learned my way without people looking over your shoulders, without the box around you, it really does make the school year better. So we've got some amazing guests coming up. Take your breaks, get to the beach like us for right now. The waves don't look too bad back there. But I got to tell you, if you work through the summer, this is going to be the cheesiest line to end on. Are you ready, Allie? You better wear shades because your future's going to be bright. Thank you all for listening to the Disrupt Education podcast and watching if you're on YouTube or Spotify. If you haven't yet, take a look because we've got a killer background today. Hey, we start next week with some amazing guests, firing you up. You all are great learners, lifelong learners and educators. Doesn't matter where you are. You might be in a school, you might be at home, you might be at a job, whatever. Now's the time. So set your schedule for next week, Wednesday mornings when we release these. We'll talk to you next time on the Disrupt Education podcast. Thank you so much for joining us on this week's episode of the Disrupt Education podcast. Be sure to like and subscribe so you never miss an episode.
Are you ready to disrupt the educational arena you're a part of? For more ways to get involved in the work we do here at Disrupt Education, check us out at disrupteducation.co. or find us on LinkedIn at Peter Hostrasser or Allie Privet.
Our mission here is to help facilitate and amplify changes in the educational system through local initiatives and help you scale them into community movements. Our building network of disruptors in education are working to move beyond scores and grades as the only measure for student learning. If your school district, college, campus, or organization is looking for facilitators of this work, reach out on our website or social media.
And if you have any thoughts or feedback on this week's episode or any episode, we'd love to hear from you. Until next time, keep pushing the boundaries, taking risks, and most importantly, disrupting education.